Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me, Father Alex, the vicar of St Matthew's in Burnley on the Godcast today, is Professor Helen King. Now, Professor Helen is a classical scholar. She's an advocate for medical humanities. But she's also a member of General Synod, and we're here today to talk about some of the issues that are raging there at the moment. Helen, it's wonderful to get you on the Godcast. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, Alex. It's lovely to be here. I'm a great admirer of the podcast. You get interesting people, and I hope I'm going to be able to live up to that.
I've no doubts whatsoever. Helen, let's just start with this situation, because you and I are both on General Synod, and we feel the heat of the battle sometimes, don't we, in that chamber that's been raging around issues of living in love and faith and human sexuality over many years now. Can you just kind of give that some sort of context? Because there will be people who are listening to us today who kind of hear what's going on, but maybe don't fully understand. What would your kind of summary be of it right now as we approach Christmas 23?
Okay, so I guess my first thing would just be, it's been going on a long time. I mean, you can time this as 40 years of discussion if you want to. Depends which of the many, many reports the church has written about sexuality that you go back to. And we never seem to come to any sort of change, any sort of decision. Just goes round and round. And the current round and round started in 2015, really, when one of the reports that came to the church suggested we should have some conversations between people who thought differently. And these were set up as the shared conversations. They were run in the diocese. I went on the one for my diocese, Oxford Diocese. It was like 3 days, 2 nights, sort of stuck in a hotel, discussing issues of sexuality. You couldn't make it up, trying to sort of set it in the context, like, was this a new discussion? Was it all because of contraception becoming more effective, the pill? What was going on here? And those were actually, I found, quite helpful. Some people found them really painful. They weren't painless, but I found them helpful because you really got to know people as individuals over that 3 days. And even if you didn't agree with them on sexuality and on what we should do about LGBT people, you could understand where they're coming from, people, right? Then that led to a motion that came to Synod to take note of a report that the House of Bishops turned up with in 2017, and that was defeated. Unheard of moment. Synod refused to take note. And then they set up another process called Living in Love and Faith. And I was asked to be on the group of about 40 people, contributing a big book, as it turned out, and a course that people could do to help people think through issues of identity, gender identity, sexuality, and so on. And that then went on for years and years with people doing it in the parishes. Not all parishes did it. Not all wanted to do it. Fine, but you can't say it's a new thing that's come up this month. And then a motion came to Synod in February this year to move forward with same-sex blessings, not marriage. So the Church of England still, years behind the rest of society. Not marriages, just blessings. And then that has now been watered down. So it's not just blessings. It's very, very small thing. It's gone from not marriage to blessings to not blessings, but sort of little prayers you can do in a church service with a couple. But it's not a marriage, and there aren't any red rings exchanged, and you mustn't look like you're going to a wedding. And it's become tinier and tinier. And now we've got a motion coming to Synod in November to say that basically that we approve the direction of travel. We approve where the bishops are going with this. Well, yeah.
That's a great
explanation. Does that seem reasonable? I mean, you've read the papers. Does that seem reasonable to you?
I think that's a really great way of explaining it to people, far better than I could anyway. And Helen, you're an academic. You have been in education for many years, and your interests are in medicine and things like that. What is the thing that leads you to the conclusion that affirmation and blessings and marriage of same-sex couples is the right thing to do? What is your theological response to people who would question what you believe to be true?
My theological response to that comes out of a bigger picture for me of what the Bible is about. And for me, the Bible is about inclusion. It's about more and more people being drawn into the love of God. So that means the inclusion not just of the Jews, but of the Gentiles. Oh, then the fight against slavery, the inclusion of women, and now full inclusion of people whose sexuality is on the lesbian, gay, bisexual sort of end of things. It's a sort of progress. And also incarnation. My theology is very incarnational. I think over the years, I don't know about you, but Christmas and Easter, it's like, which one's the sort of biggie for you? Is it Easter? Is it all about the cross? Is it all about redemption and atonement? Is it Christmas, God becoming human? And I've gone quite from Easter to quite Christmas now. That doesn't mean I like Christmas as in loads of tinsel and stuff like that, but what we celebrate at Christmas, that God became fully human. And our full humanity is in Christ. You know, there was been the argument years ago that we couldn't have women priests because Jesus was a bloke. So only blokes could be priests. And we've got away from that. We've realized that Jesus's humanity has to be sort of somewhere on gender spectrum, sexuality spectrum. But the point is all of us are included.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of incarnational theology and an inclusive, increasingly inclusive God's love taking in everyone. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. But being part of the Anglican Communion, Helen, not everybody holds that belief, do they? There are lots of people out there, and once upon a time, that was kind of the great attraction for me, was that we all kind of could sit together under one very wide umbrella. But it seems becoming more and more difficult. Just mentioning female ordination, there is a large number of Christians in the Anglican Communion who are still opposed to the ordination of female women. How do you square the circle when you come up with these objections? You know, because as well as and as highly educated as somebody like yourself is, there are highly educated Christians and people on the other side of the fence who holds a deeply different view to the one that you and I perhaps hold. How does that sit with you now? Has it changed over the years? Has it become more difficult as you progress through this journey?
Yeah, I think my own personal journey has been through lots of different types of churches. So very conservative evangelical, Sunday school and early teens, youth club sort of background, and then parish church, and then a bit of a thing with Anglo-Catholic expressions of faith, which I find very powerful. I like, the whole symbolism, the contemplative life rather than the active life, all these sorts of things. And somehow we've managed to hold this together in the Church of England. And I think that's great because it means it's all there for you. You're not saying only this sort of Christianity is okay. It's a much broader thing. So I've personally benefited from moving around between different groups. And I think one of the things with shared conversations was that you'd sit down with people who thought very differently on lots of things, including sexuality. And yet you'd get that underlying faith in God becoming human in Jesus, and in Jesus's life as something to emulate, and in Jesus's self-giving as something to emulate. And somehow that was the big umbrella, as you say, it's the umbrella thing. And it's somehow we've gone beyond that now. We've got to a very sort of carping, sniping approach to each other, which isn't good at all. I want to hear what people who don't think like me think. It doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with them, but I want to hear where they're coming from. And I think that has been something I've done over the last few years with various groups I've had to sit in, where you hear, and what I hear from the conservative evangelical end particularly, is a sort of different view of the world to what I have. So for them, it's very much about how the church must be, one of their favorite words, countercultural. So if the world is affirming gay sexuality as valid, we must go the other way. Yeah, it's all about sex. It's never about things like attitudes to money or power. It's always sex. It seems to be we're getting obsessed. Well, we've been obsessed.
I think it's interesting what you said, because you said that you like to listen to what other people have got to say, and I do as well. And you're right. The sniping and the bad feeling is palpable at the moment. But one of the problems I have with once I've listened to somebody else's argument is they then want me to conform to that argument.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily want them. I mean, of course, I'd love them to conform to my position, but I don't expect that of them. And I wouldn't try and put up a barrier for them to stop believing what they believe. But it feels that that's what's going on right now. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's exactly it. It was interesting in the February debate, we had various people standing up and saying, well, they had chosen to remain virgins until they married, and we were somehow undermining that if we said that sexual expression was possible outside marriage, because of course same-sex couples can't be married in the Church of England, therefore they can't, no one who's same-sex can have any sort of sexual expression of their love for someone. So it's also quite circular. But they were acting like somehow the view that you stay a virgin till you marry was going to be completely undermined if we say that same-sex couples can be married in church. No one's undermining it. This is your choice. You know, we are all able to read, or hopefully, or hear the expressions of faith from the past. We can hear and read about people who have chosen different ways of following Jesus, and then we can decide whether that's for us or not. And there's no one saying, you know, your decision to stay virgin till you marry is somehow utterly wrong. That was your decision. Respect it. Someone else who's in a same-sex relationship and wants to express that sexually, that is their decision. The trouble is, on the conservative evangelical, they would say, yes, that's your decision to sin. And it's the throwing around of the word sin I find very distressing. I've been in more than one room now where someone who is gay and in a relationship has said to the conservative evangelicals in the room, what do you think of my relationship? And they go sort of very grudgingly, well, you know, I'm sure the commitment is jolly good and it's, you know, good that you're looking after each other, but you're a sinner. It's like, this is the only sin worth talking about. And I really don't see where the sin is anyway in a committed couple giving consent to each other to enjoy sex together. I really don't see that as sin.
And what would you say to someone who, on that position, who says, I'm saying that because I love you.
Oh, yeah.
This is about eschatology. This is about where you're going to end up, brother or sister.
Yeah. Well,
by all means, what would you say to that?
I've heard it. By all means, yes, say it. That's your view. I don't share that view. And I find it very odd that somehow that is an okay thing to say, whereas the other choices you make in your life somehow are not the subject of this sort of, we really love you, that's why we're telling you that you're going to hell. As an appeal, you know, as a way of sharing the love of Jesus, I don't find the you're going to hell if you don't do this terribly helpful.
Yeah. Helen, I know of conservative evangelical priests whose own children have come out.
Yeah.
And have been effectively evicted from the family status. Yeah. And whilst that position remained, to me, that seems quite inhumane. That seems quite cruel. What would you say? Yeah,
I agree entirely. It's cruel. I think that's the only word for it. It's why does this trump everything else? You know, why is your sexual identity, your sexuality, the way you express that, somehow a reason to abandon all other expressions of love for someone? And you have to say, I tell you this in love, it's actually, it's abusive language. And I think it's taking over the language of love for something it really wasn't intended for.
Yeah.
I think you only have to, the more you, I'm getting quite carried away here, the more you know people who are in faithful same-sex relationships and you respect, you know, their love for each other, the support they give, the way that their homes are places of open friendship and acceptance of people of all different faiths, nationalities, everything. You know, this is not something to be scared of, yet fear seems to be one of the really big emotions that's being stirred around at the moment. Do you think?
I think so. Yeah. And if we reflect on February, Helen, on a personal level, for me, that was one of the most emotionally difficult things I've experienced
Yeah.
in my ministry. It was so disheartening at times, and I really didn't want to vote. That we were voting for, like you say, a reduction of what we wanted and
Yeah.
what we were looking for, and the term crumbs under the table was being thrown around, and I very much felt that. But in the end, I was faced with a decision. Well, it is this or nothing at the moment, and so I voted to support that. What was your own reflections of February, Helen?
Yeah, I felt all over the place in terms of where I wanted to vote. In the end, yes, I voted for it, but grudgingly, always grudgingly. I think there's a bizarre thing in the church at the moment where they seem to think they put you in a room with a load of people who think differently, and somehow you're going to come out the other end all friendship and love. And it doesn't work like that. I mean, we had small group work, as you know, in February, and I found it bruising. There were some people in that group who wouldn't even speak. And I think in many ways, that's the option to take. If you say anything, you then get shot down. There is no acceptance that there's more than one view. And one of the things I loved about the Living in Love and Faith big book, I mean, it's huge. No one, presumably except those of us who had to read through the drafts, has read the whole thing. But it's got a section on the different views you can take in the Church of England on sexuality and on the Bible's authority. And just showing there's a spectrum of views. It's not like you're in, you're out. It's like there are different ways of understanding these complicated truths, and they're all okay. And we need to respect that some of us have read the Bible and prayed and come to different conclusions, rather than saying, you haven't read the Bible. When I was at Synod in July, a conservative evangelical came up to me at lunchtime and sat next to me and talked to me. And then he came around to, I don't understand, Helen, you know what the Bible really says about this. You just choose to ignore it. I'm like, no, I don't think that's right. What do you think it says then? He said, oh, you know perfectly well what it says. And we had this awful non-conversation, which was all about how you interpret some verses of scripture that are probably about something nothing like what our categories are today, using words that are never used except once in the Bible, and yet somehow people think they know what they mean. It's not easy. Jesus did not say anything about same-sex couples.
No.
Fact.
But
yeah. Even that's disputed. Oh, no, this refers to, well, no.
And, despite our difficulties voting for it, the motion was passed that there would be to commend new liturgy and pastoral guidance. And a friend of both of ours, I'll not say who, is now asking the question, well, what the effing hell have they been doing since February? Is that your kind of feeling as well?
Yes, it is, because it's not as if this is all new. They must have known this was going to come up. What did the bishops do for the 6 years that Living in Love and Faith was sort of going through the system, going out into parishes, people doing the courses, filling in the questionnaires? We know the House of Bishops had discussions of Living in Love and Faith at its various meetings. For anyone who doesn't know, the House of Bishops never releases its minutes, so you don't actually know what they talked about. They release a sort of very bland couple of paragraphs saying they thought about X, they considered Y, and they don't say what they thought. But we know all their sessions, they seem to have had some session on Living in Love and Faith. What did they do with it? Why didn't they think, okay, maybe we need some theological work on this or something on that. There's going to be questions about this. How do we answer them? I think the other thing about the bishops that's worth saying here is they have been absolutely monolithic, like all one view. Even when we had the great defeat of the Take Note debate in 2017, the House of Bishops voted all on the same side, except for one who pressed the wrong button. I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you really? But the House of Clergy and House of Laity were the ones that voted the thing down. So bishops went one way, all of them except one. Clergy and laity went the other way. But this thing about the monolithic bishops, only now do we find out that bishops don't agree. And I find that liberating, because we don't agree either. It's not like you lot are a load of heretics and all the bishops think this. The bishops think different things. And if a bishop can think that, well, that's kind of gives authority to lay people who think that.
Yeah.
And
of
my
course,
Bishop of Oxford, came out first. He was the first one to produce a sort of, what came out in the gay sense. He's a straight guy, but came out in the sense of actually saying what he thought and how he'd come to it as someone from an evangelical background, and how he'd gradually started to realize that actually same-sex relationships were completely valid and the church should celebrate them. And then after that, a few other bishops said, yeah, we agree. Now we're finding out that the House of Bishops is very, very definitely divided.
Which in many ways is a kind of is a good thing, because it gives that Anglican umbrella that we all crave, but it also suggests that God calls all different people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for any of those bishops that might, let's be honest, there's probably one or two gay bishops within that community. For anybody to deny what they believe to be true, is almost like a crime against their vocation. I think it's almost like saying, well, you're here under false pretenses. You're a heretic, and how you got here is just a bit of luck, and it wasn't really God in it. It was you manipulating a certain situation to take this place in this chamber, which I find really, really strange and quite repulsive. July, Helen, was less about living in love and faith, but it was equally chaotic, wasn't it? And I just again left there thinking, I'm not sure if this General Synod is actually fit for purpose. I'm not sure if it's got the right processes, the right listening voices. I just came away thinking, what am I doing? And do you share that view?
Yeah, I do share that view. And I've been through Synod before, because I was on it when I was very young, on the ordination of women debates. I was there for women deacons and women priests, and I saw, some pretty unpleasant language was used, and it was very offensive at times. And I was in a really hard position, because I was both in the Catholic group on Synod, which was opposed to the ordination of women as priests, although okay with deacons, and I was in moving to the ordination of women. So I was really split. I had a very, very painful time. And at the end of that period on Synod, I actually stopped going to church for some years. That's how bad Synod was for me. And God brought me back. So, and then eventually I found myself called to be on Synod again. Drat. So I know how bad it can be. But even for me, July was exceptional, because that point where Synod as a whole wanted to hear Jasvinder and Steve from the safeguarding board, who'd been sacked, come and talk to us. We wanted them there. And yet there didn't seem to be a standing order that would allow it. Well, what is the point of a situation where your standing orders don't allow you to do something that you really need to do? Who is driving this? Cart before the horse moment, isn't it? Quite bizarre. And then we had this, I thought, disgusting spectacle of people all over Synod pouring through their standing orders, trying to find one that would allow them to get these two people to have 5 minutes each just to talk to us. I mean, that was hideous. The chamber was littered with people in little huddles trying to find a standing order, and then getting up and saying, how about this one? No, that doesn't work, because, for goodness sake, just do it. And I appreciate standing orders are there to control us and to stop us just getting silly, because we can get silly. But surely they should be enabling us to do the work we need to do. And I found that very, very difficult to get my head around.
Yeah. And coming kind of to where we are now, that we are now in a place where, well, who knows what's going to happen. I was very interested to read the piece on Via Media News by John Seymour, who suggests that the direction of travel now is probably towards the only options are two potentially homophobic kind of outcomes. Whichever way it goes, it's going to be not good news for people who are inclusive and LGBTQI plus and all the allies. So, what is the way forward? How do you see this playing out, Helen?
Well, we have this odd situation now where what I thought was coming to Synod is not what's coming to Synod. So when I say what I thought, I was asked as vice chair of the General Synod's Gender and Sexuality group to be on a group called Living with Difference, which was met 3 times, 3 days in September. Usual setup, liberals, conservatives, some people who are sort of in the middle, in the same room, try and make some sense of it all. And I thought what was coming to Synod was going to be, let's bring forward the blessings, the full standalone services of blessing of a same-sex couple. Bring that forward, but with under some canon law that allows it to be there on a temporary basis, with the archbishops basically taking responsibility for it legally. And then some years down the line, like maybe 10 years down the line, after another synod has been elected and maybe there, then give it formal Canon B2, it's called, authorization, so it becomes an official service of the Church of England. But let's do it on a trial basis. Let's do it now. And then after the House of Bishops met on the 9th of October, that suddenly went out the window. And we've got this different system now where we will have a vote on whether to have these standalone services, but not till 2025, and not till all the dioceses have had a chance to have a debate and vote on it. And you can imagine the politicking that will go on there, absolutely hideous. And meanwhile, all we get is these prayers, which are terribly mild prayers, honestly. I mean, you mentioned Via Media, a piece that's come out today, which I haven't yet plugged on social media, but will do, which is arguing that actually even the prayers in the prayers of love and faith are not even mentioning the fact this is actually a couple. They're making out it's friends, just friends. So it's become even smaller
I know.
than I thought it was going to be. And I don't know where we go with that, because the alternative is, shoot the whole thing down in flames like we did in 2017. Then what? We've got nothing.
Yeah. But Helen, I feel quite patronized. I feel quite ashamed that I can only use a prayer that's authorized for this. I like to think I'm a person of integrity. I can't think of any other thing that I need permission to pray about or to pray for. It's an insult. It's an insult not only to the gay and LGBTQI community. It's an insult to me as a priest.
Yeah,
it stinks that I have to. Oh, I can only say it. Sorry. You can imagine if a couple came to me and said, could you offer me a prayer? That's also, I just need to check that I'm not going to actually compromise myself or risk a CDM because I'd like to pray for you. It's deeply offensive. It's deeply grotesque. It's deeply unpastoral.
It's good to hear you say that, Alex. Honestly, I mean, you have to keep saying this, because there's always this thing that, it's only the LGBT people who are an issue here. We're all involved in this. We're all involved. This is not just about friends of ours who happen to be lesbian or gay. This is about straight people as well. It's about priests. It's about lay people who lead services. All of us are involved in this. And it is. I just think you can bless anything else. You can bless backpacks. You can bless tractors. You can bless small furry animals.
Yeah, these nail clippers. I can bless these, Helen. It's just.
Oh, thanks. That'd be great. Yeah, thanks. Bless your nail clippers. I love it. I mean, you can bless anything, but you can't bless a couple, because, and this is what the conservative evangelicals would say, because you're blessing sin. So I do not see where the sin is in a committed couple coming to ask for God's blessing. I'm just delighted that they want God's blessing. Can we celebrate?
I think one of the other things that I struggle with is I interviewed Luke Lorna a few weeks ago about class. I actually think this buys into that issue of class. The language that we use. I mean, when the term covenanted relationship came up, I'd never heard of it. It was the biggest load of baloney and bull that I've ever heard of. I thought, I'm going on, what's a covenanted relationship? Don't patronize me by looking down at me saying, you don't know what that means. It's just so infuriating and so ridiculous. And one of the reasons it infuriates me, Helen, is because of what it says to the world that's out there. When I first listened to the first presidential addresses on Synod from the Archbishop of Canterbury, and we learnt that church numbers have fallen to a record low and continue to fall. What on earth is this saying to the people that we actually want to reach out to? And in a context such as mine, which is very working class, says it as it is, this stuff just floats over their head, and we just seem to be completely irrelevant and uninspiring, uninviting, and unwelcoming. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant, but that's how it feels.
It's a good rant. It's a good rant, and I agree completely. So one of the things I do in my church life is I'm a street pastor. So every month I go out for an exciting night on the town, and I talk to people who never go near a church. And frequently we get onto this topic of, so what about gay people then? You know, why is the church so against gay people? My friend's gay and he's a great bloke. And, you know, and off they go. And I can't explain it. All I can say is I'm totally with you. I agree the church has got it wrong on this. People understand, you know, entering a committed relationship, it may be marriage, it may not be marriage, but it's commitment. You make a commitment to someone in your life. And you may at some point in your life want to formalize that into marriage. Or you may, you know, I've got plenty of friends who people think they're married, they're not actually married, they've just been together a really long time and they're committed to each other.
Yeah.
Fine, not a problem. And some of those people will want to come to church and have that relationship recognized by a congregation and their friends and their families and ask for God's blessing on it. And I don't see any problem with any of that.
Yeah.
And to say, well, we're not blessing that, ooh, that's sin. Come on, you know, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Don't you, you know, we all sin all the time.
Yeah.
But this is not sin, in my view. This is love.
Yeah. And I suppose in a situation where a democratic vote has been taken and been passed, but it's not being fulfilled, there is the potential for people to go rogue, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's the potential that people are going to just do it anyway, and that would be unfortunate, but perhaps inevitable for many people, because some people have just had enough, haven't they? They're like, well, you know, you're not listening to us, you're not reacting on what's been on the decisions that have been taken. You are dithering and posturing and doing everything you can to slow this down, this progress. What keeps you going in situations like this, Helen?
Silence keeps me going. Last night I was leading the online silent service for our church. When I say silent service, we have like a 5-minute reflection on a verse from the readings on the previous Sunday. And then we go into silence for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we have Compline. And we do it on Zoom. And it's wonderful because it is completely, somehow we're all together, even though we're not physically together. And we enter into silence with God. And honestly, that's the only thing that will keep me going, I think. I think also local church helps keep you going, just because local churches like real people who have different views but stay together. I find that very encouraging. The national church and the local church just seem like totally different worlds sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. And what you know, again, this is your opinion, not everybody's, but what do you think that Jesus would make of all this, Helen?
Oh, it's a Jesus wept situation, I think. You know, we just want to bang some heads together and say, look, just let's get on with the mission, folks. Let's just get on with the mission, accept people for who they are, welcome them, show God's love to them, and move on. We can't keep going round and round and round this thing endlessly. It's bad for mission. It's bad for all of us as individuals. It's very, very damaging. The thought of, remember, we've got 9 hours, they say, of debate in November. 9 hours? What could we be doing with 9 hours? Think of all those 450-something members of Synod times 9 hours. Think what we could be doing.
Yeah.
It's just terrifying.
Yeah, particularly as what is going on in society at the moment. Yeah. There's work to be done, isn't there?
There is so much.
And just to finish, Helen, it's been lovely chatting to you, and I'm really grateful for your words of wisdom. What would your message be to the LGBTQI community, not just Christians, but, you know, somebody, just the odd person that might pick up this podcast or YouTube video and go, well, I'm gay. That, you know, is the church a place to be? Yeah,
I think I'd say don't judge us by this. You know, I have gay friends who make sure whenever they move church, if they move to a new area, they go and see the vicar. This church a safe place for me? And that's a good question to ask. And there are congregations out there who are not interested in what your sexuality is. They just want to welcome you as a person loved by God. You know, find those congregations. There's an organization called Inclusive Church, which keeps a list of churches which are known to be welcoming to everybody. You know, there is actually no reason why, as an LGBT person, you can't explore the church, explore the Christian faith in a safe place where you're not going to be told all the time that you're the sinner. So there is hope for you, because I believe that God welcomes all of us, knows us all as individuals, and values us all as who we are, not as something we're trying desperately to be, but we can't, because that's not what our sexuality is.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you on a number of levels. Thank you for putting in the hard yards and the miles, because this might not come in our lifetime even, but I think it will come, and it is through people like yourselves who speak up and speak out that will enable that to happen in the same way that it happened for female clergy all those years ago. So thank you for that. I also want to thank you for being a mate. I never thought I'd have a professor who's a mate, but I feel that you are somebody I can look to and just say what's going on, and you'll just break that down for me. And I'm very grateful for that on a personal level. So thank you.
Thank you. We're actually quite human, we professors. I mean, when I met my husband, which I did on christianconnection.co.uk, there's a plug, my profile said I have a terrible secret which puts all men off. And that was the fact that I was a professor. He was remarkably unfazed by it. So that was a good sign, wasn't it?
Well, thank you so much, Helen. I look forward to seeing you in November, where we'll go through all the pain and suffering again. But for now, thanks for coming on the Godcast. Thank you.
Lovely to see you. Thanks very much for having me, Alex.